This is the Franchise QB Podcast, where we empower entrepreneurs to win big in franchising. We huddle up weekly to educate our audience about the most successful small business model ever created, franchising.
Welcome to the Franchise QB Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Halpern, a 20-year industry veteran and entrepreneur. My mission is for listeners to achieve their American dreams of creating wealth and independence through franchise ownership. Every week, we speak with franchisees, franchisors, or vendors that support the industry. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started. Joining us in the huddle today is Mike Marcantonio, CEO of Alliance Franchise Brands. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey, Mike. Thanks a lot. Great to see you again, and thanks for having me on the podcast.
Absolutely. It is great to see you again. And you are the CEO of Alliance Franchise Brands, franchisor of almost 600 locations in North America, operating the company's brands, which are grouped as follows. I'm going to walk through the four groups you guys have. So the marketing and print group is Allegra Marketing Print Mail. And in that family are American Speedy Printing, established in 1976, InstiPrints, 1965, KKP, and Speedy Printing Center. So we can see a lot of longevity with those brands. Then we have the next group, which is the Sign and Graphics Group. Image 360, Signs by Tomorrow, which was established in 1986, as well as Signs Now. And the Direct Mail Group, which is RSVP. And last but certainly not least, the Sign Installation Group. I'm excited to talk to you about this one. It's the newest, which is called True Install. And this is the first concept in your portfolio that doesn't have a brick and mortar component. So before we dive into those brands, let's learn a little bit more about your background. You were gracious enough to invite myself and about 20 other franchise consultants back in February to come visit your headquarters in Plymouth, Michigan. We had the opportunity to meet with your leadership team, tour your facilities, specifically the corporate locations of Allegra and Image 360, which were extremely impressive. And you shared a story with us at dinner about growing up in an Italian-American, hardworking, blue-collar family. Can we start by you sharing some of your upbringing with us?
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. Yeah, both of my parents were born in Italy, and they came to this country as teenagers after World War II. They came here with their families, and they essentially came here with nothing after the war. And I watched as my dad and my other relatives, they worked so hard to try to make, a better life for their families. My dad worked the afternoon shift at the Detroit News, and He started his own business putting in underground sprinkler systems on the side. And, I started working with him when I was old enough to run and fetch him tools from the van. And when I turned 16, he made me an incredible offer. And his offer was this, that if I would go back out and make service calls after he went to work, I could keep whatever I collected from the customers. I didn't even have to pay him back for what parts I used. So,
so you got to participate in Dad's side hustle a little bit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was 16 years old in 1981. And when I'd go back out, I was probably making $50 to $100 an hour back then. I mean, that's good money today. And
that's great money for a young man.
Incredible, especially for a 16-year-old. So as you can imagine, I was pretty much out till dark every night trying to get in as many service calls as I could, helping my dad out and helping myself out. And, it was my dad's business, but when I was out in the afternoons and evenings, it felt like it was my own business. And, this was the first time I had to have that great feeling of when you have your own thing like that, the harder you work, the better you could do and the more money you could make. And I really think that this is where my entrepreneurial drive started way back then.
Yeah, what a great way to kind of establish a strong work ethic as a 16-year-old. That's a really neat opportunity. So yeah, you've been with Alliance Franchise Brands for almost 24 years. That's a lot of longevity. Yeah. Many of those years as CEO of the company. So take us back to how you discovered franchise.
Sure. So I got an accounting degree in college, and my first job out of college was in public accounting. I was working at Arthur Andersen, and I had a handful of clients who were in the franchising business. So it was getting to know those clients and learning their business. That was my first exposure to franchising. But one of my biggest clients, who is a franchisor, was Domino's Pizza. Okay. And Domino's made me an offer to go work for them, initially as their tax director, to run their tax department. I was a federal income tax guy in public accounting, and eventually got promoted to vice president of tax there at Domino's. And that's where I really learned a lot more about franchising. But you know, Mike, there's an interesting side story there too that I'd like to tell quickly.
Yeah, please do.
And that is that my client, back when I was in public accounting, and the guy that made me the offer to go work there, was Domino's longtime CFO, Harry Silverman. And you know, Harry made me that proverbial offer I couldn't refuse. Never thought I'd leave public accounting, but I went to go work there for Harry, and got to know Harry really well while I worked with him. And when I decided to leave, Harry and I kept in touch. We stayed friends. And then after Harry retired, I was lucky enough to get him to come work here with me at Alliance Franchise Brands. So now Harry is our chief financial advisor, and he's part of our executive team, and actually one of the owners of Alliance Franchise Brands too. And what a awesome resource to have on our team here.
Yeah, I mean, that experience is incredible. I mean, looking what Domino's has evolved from that time till now, it's pretty incredible. Yeah. So how did you get involved in the printing and the visual communication space way back in the early 2000s?
Sure. Well, if you'll indulge me a little bit, maybe I'll take you along on my entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, because I didn't go directly into this, but so it started, right out of college. My best friend from college, Greg, and I were rooming together. And as I mentioned, being involved in my dad's business kind of started this entrepreneurial drive and thinking about having my own business one day. And I learned from living with Greg, we'd chat after we get home from work, that he wanted to have his own business one day too. And so we talked about it a lot, but I never knew what I wanted to do, right? Like all my experience up to this point was as a federal income tax guy, and I didn't want to hang my own shingle out doing that. The tax law is complicated and changing, and if I was going to do that, I would have just stayed at a large firm. So the question was always, what am I going to go do? And, Mike, this is why I have so much respect for your profession, for the franchise consultants, because this is an incredible service that you provide to your candidates, right? Like, I was in that position of wanting to have my own business, but not knowing what to do. And the fact that you guide people through that, I think, is a wonderful thing.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, sure. So I just keep plodding along, doing my thing. Arthur Andersen, take the job at Domino's. And then in 1996, it was Greg who had the idea of going into business with his brother-in-law, Scott, who was working in an art gallery at the time. And they did that in 1996. And then they invited me to join them in 1998. So that was really my first foray into small business ownership. I became a 1/3 owner of this commercial corporate art and picture framing business with those guys. And tell a little side story here too. That business did quite well. It started out of Scott's basement, and it grew a lot. And as it grew, and with a lot of our clients, they started asking us to do other things like, hey, can you put our logo behind the reception desk? Or in a hospital, can you do our donor appreciation wall? And we realized that a lot of the stuff that we were doing is the same things that our sign businesses and the franchise do. So in 2013, we took that first business that I was involved in, and one of the owners, we brought it into Alliance Franchise Brands. We converted it to an Image 360, and we added all the signage to it. And Mike, that's our corporate owned Image 360 here in the building now, still run by Greg. that you got to tour when you.
I was going to say, it's really neat to be able to go
Yeah,
check that out.
yeah. And then Scott, who has just an incredible background and is very creative, had worked in that art gallery. Scott, we moved on to our franchise support team, and Scott's out in the field working with a lot of our franchise members, helping them to move up the value chain in terms of the things that they're selling to their clients. But anyway, getting kind of back to my story. So again, the timeline, like went to Domino's in 95 and got into this business with Greg and Scott in 98. I won't go through all the details of it, but over the next 2 or 3 years, a couple other opportunities presented themselves to me, and I got involved in 2 other businesses. So now I'm still working full time at Domino's, and I'm trying to be involved in these businesses in the evenings and on the weekends. I got my dad's work ethic and never minded putting in, those extra hours.
Right.
But then the next thing that happened is my boss, Harry, came to me and he wanted to move me into other areas at Domino's. So he said, you know what, Mike, why don't you go hire a tax director to run the tax department? I have some other things that I'd like to get you involved in, which I thought was really great. And I always loved Harry. He was a great boss. But as I started thinking about that, and I went out and I hired one of my former colleagues, a guy that I knew from Arthur Andersen, to run the tax department. So I knew that was in good hands. So I had this thought, I'm like, why don't I take a leave of absence since the tax department's covered before I start my new duties, take 2 to 3 months and just kind of get caught up with these businesses that I'd been working on in the evenings and on the weekends. I was doing a lot of the accounting work with my background and so forth. So I went to Harry with this, and of course Harry said, "Sure, Mike, whatever you want." But as soon as I started working in these small businesses full time, Mike, I realized that was what I truly wanted to do, and It was really hard leaving Harry. Harry was such a good boss. It was a big decision to take my 13-year career at that point as a federal income tax guy and leave that behind and pursue these entrepreneurial dreams that I've had. But it was right around this time, it was probably within a year of that, I was approached by a friend of mine who happened to be on the management team of what is this company now, but at the time back in 2000, it was still American Speedy Printing Centers.
Okay.
And he told me that the management team wanted to buy the company, but they were looking for some outside investors and asked if I'd be interested in it. So I got all the information from him. I looked it all over and decided that it was something that I wanted to do. So that is how I initially got involved in this business. In October of 2000, I became an investor. So I didn't go out and find this business. It kind of found me by having this guy come and approach me to see if I wanted to be one of those investors. So now we're at October of 2000. And for the first 4 or 5 years, I would describe my involvement in this business as that of like an active board member. I was getting weekly reports from the CEO, looking at the financial statements on a monthly basis, and, coming in for various meetings to try to learn the business and be more involved in it. And then about 2005, I started getting very interested in the business, and I started seeing certain opportunities and felt that there were things that maybe we weren't capitalizing on. And I started having meetings with the CEO about those things. And then we decided that I would come on board in a part-time 20-hour-a-week role. And I did that in 2006. And so my initial position with the company was as chief strategy officer. And over time, I kind of worked my way up to full-time in that role. And then in 2011, my predecessor asked me to go to lunch. And at lunch, he let me know that he was going to retire, and he thought that I should take over as CEO of the business.
Wow.
And so I gave that some thought, and gave it a lot of thought, because I had a lot of other things going on. It meant shedding all my other kind of responsibilities and really putting all my time and effort into this. And I decided that that's what I wanted to do. And so I took on the role of CEO in 2011 and, been at it ever since.
That is so great. That's such an interesting way that you discovered franchising, in public accounting, working with a client, building that relationship that you did. Um, and then down the road, kind of following those entrepreneurial endeavors. And that ended up being a franchise system that you guys have obviously grown quite substantially over the past 2 decades. So
Yeah,
what?
it's been fun, Mike. I try to tell my daughter about this and other people. This doesn't even feel like work to me. I just love what I do. Yeah.
That's so great. Well, it's a great thing that you followed that entrepreneurial itch and kind of parlayed it into the business that we're going to discuss today. So
Sure.
let's talk about the company, Alliance
Yeah.
Franchise Brands. What is it?
Yeah. So, Alliance Franchise Brands, it's our holding company of all the brands that you described in your intro. It's the franchisor. It's where we house our home office team that supports our franchise members. But maybe to give you a better idea of who we are, I'd like to maybe walk you quickly through our core focus and our core values, if that's
That'd be
okay
great.
with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we follow the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah, Gino Wickman, I've read the book.
Oh, yeah,
Traction.
Traction.
It's
Yeah,
very
so we've been doing that since 2015. And
Okay.
through EOS, we came up with our core focus, which I think is more commonly known as a mission statement in the world. And we had a mission statement before we did EOS, but we followed the EOS process. And in EOS, the core focus has two components. The first component is your purpose, cause, or passion. They want you to pick one of those. We chose passion. And what this component does is it answers the question, why does your organization exist? And this is simple for us. 2 words: empowering success. That's the only reason that we're in business, is to empower our franchise members' success.
I like how you call them franchise members too. That speaks to the way that you see the relationship.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Good observation, Mike. Yeah. And the second component of core focus is, they call it the niche. And the niche describes how you'll go about accomplishing your passion. And we do that through high impact programs and support. And high impact are the key words there. Like any organization, we have a finite amount of resources. So we have to make sure that we're directing those resources into the things that will have the highest impact to our franchise members in terms of our programs, training, and support. And just to be clear here, Mike, when we talk about high impact, we mean programs that are going to help them to grow their sales and or grow their profitability or bottom line. So put all that together, our core focus is empowering success through high impact programs and support.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how would you describe the company culture that you've created there at Alliance Franchise Brands?
Sure. Mike, I was going to go through the core values quickly.
Yeah, please do. Absolutely.
Yeah, because I think our core values are really important to us. We're a values-driven business, and I think they really tell you and your listeners a lot about who we are. So our first core value is members first. Because we never lose sight of the fact that we're in the franchising business. And when you're in the franchising business, you cannot be successful unless your franchise members are successful first. So our path to success is through our franchise members. So again, every day we're thinking about what kind of training, what kind of programs and support we could put together to help our franchise members to be successful. And we love this value because it has a dual meaning for us, because we refer to our employees as team members.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that in franchising, our most valuable asset is our team. So it's critical to us that we hire, retain the absolute best people that we can find to serve our franchise members. Next, we're ethical and trustworthy. Our franchise members sign long-term agreements with us, and we take that very seriously. When it comes to things like trust, it takes a long time to earn, but it could be lost so easily, sometimes with just one misstep. So it's critical to us that we adhere to this value 100% of the time. Next, we are can-do, results-driven. Our franchise members operate in changing and evolving industries. And whenever there's change, there can be challenges. But whenever there are challenges, there can also be opportunities. So we need team members that are going to face those challenges and figure out how to get through them or get around them and get to those results that we need. At Alliance Franchise Brands, we respect others. It's a simple value. We follow the golden rule and we treat others the way that we would like to be treated. And finally, we have a passion for being great. And this value is based off of one of my favorite books. It's called Small Giants, Companies That Choose to Be Great Instead of Big. And in this book, they followed a group of companies, and they didn't sit around a table talking about how they were going to get big. They talked about how they could be great at what they did. And, they all ended up becoming big and successful businesses, because at the end of the day, people want to do business with great companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think those core values that you just articulated probably, led me to where I was going with my next question about your culture. So let's touch on that a little bit. What's the culture like at the organization?
Sure. I'm going to start by talking about the culture of our network and our franchise members. And our franchise members, are some of the most dedicated, hardworking business people that I know. They're resilient. They're adaptable. As I said before, they've seen their industry and their business go through a lot of changes over the years, but yet they all always seem to know, they've got that entrepreneurial drive and they figure it out. They adapt to changes and they move forward and they continue to grow and be successful. And, just at a personal level, I find them to just be, good, honest, hardworking people, Mike. They're like the people that I grew up with. They remind me of them. And when I was making those decisions about what I was going to do, I had a lot of things going on. And when I chose to shed those other responsibilities and focus on this business, I'll tell you, a big part of that decision was meeting and spending time with a lot of our franchise members. And that's how I knew that I wanted to be part of this business.
Okay.
And then in terms of our home office team and staff, I think we just have a great culture and it's just a wonderful business. And I can say that without trying to sound arrogant because I can't really even take credit for it, Mike. I inherited such a great culture from my predecessors. They had done such a nice job. Sometimes I just think of myself as a steward of it. And I just want to keep that going. It was started by the people before me. And one way that I like to think about this, and something that I think really speaks to this, is how long people stay at a company, right? If it's a great company, people are going to want to stay and work at it. And, it's really interesting. A lot of the resumes that I look at, it seems to be a lot of people are switching jobs like every 2 years or 2 or 3 years. Usually I see on a lot of resumes. There are obviously exceptions to that. But so with that as a backdrop, think about this. We have 126 team members that are out there supporting our franchise members every day. And we have 68 or over half of our team members that have been with our organization for 5 years or more. We have 43 who have been here 10 years or more.
Wow.
20 who have been here 20 years or more. We have 6 people who've been here 30 years or more.
That's incredible.
With
That's so
5
rare.
of those having been here over 35 years. We have either 2 or 3 people that are closing in on 40 years and will make it this year or next year too. So, I just find that to be very impressive, and I'm just grateful to be part of this organization, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, that kind of speaks for itself. When people find a place where they feel appreciated and they're able to thrive and they're able to kind of adapt with the times, I mean, that's indicative of the tenure of a lot of these
Yeah,
core team members that you reference, which is just really impressive. So
yeah,
you mentioned, I know you're being humble in terms of the fact that you're a steward of what was created before you, but obviously your influence has had a lot of impact on why people stay there. How do you maintain that? How do you take what that predecessor gave you and kind of maintain that for all these years and going
yeah.
forward?
I said before we're a values driven business, and I think a lot of it comes back to core values. I think we know that when we surround ourselves with people who have the same values that we have, I think we get along better, we work well together, and we can do great things. So, it's important to really use our core values in the business and our HR practices, try to do our best, when we're hiring people to try to gauge whether they share those values. And then as we're managing them too, are they living up to our core values? Do they align? And then sometimes when you need to make those tough decisions about letting somebody go, maybe if really there's not a good core values match there. So I think that's really important. I believe that people want to work at a business where they feel like the company truly cares about them as a person, as an individual. I think
Yeah.
that's something that's really important, something that I always try to do, and something I really, preach to the rest of our leadership and executives. Um, I don't know, maybe this is just me, but to me, the physical environment's important. You know,
You guys have an amazing office. I
oh,
mean,
thanks,
it's
Mike.
really impressive
Thank
just
you. Thank
how
you.
it
And
kind of comes together with the industrial side as well as the office space.
yeah. And it was important to us. We were leasing space, and when our lease was up, decided we wanted to buy our building, and we bought it back in 2009. I mean, we just got a great deal on it because it was right during the Great Recession. And we really took a lot of care in trying to create a space that people wanted to be in. They wanted to come to work, and so I think that's important. And then I guess the last thing I'll say about this, and I'm maybe a little bit old school on this, Mike, but I believe that as human beings, we're social creatures by nature, and I like being around people. I draw energy from them, and I think a big part of the culture here is based on the fact that people like each other and we spend time together. So when we came out of the pandemic and a lot of people were pushing for fully remote, we talked it over as an executive team, and we decided that we still wanted people to come into the office and be together. Yet at the same time, we recognized the flexibility that they got during the pandemic and didn't really feel like we could take that away from them. So we decided to go with a hybrid, and we have people come in at least 2 days a week, and the rest of the days they can work from home. And right now that feels like a pretty good balance.
Yeah, that is a really good approach. Coming from someone like me, I was in an office 5 days a week pre-pandemic, and then moved to a home base, and now I'm hybrid, and it's definitely a good feeling because when you're kind of stuck in the same place all the time, it's nice to have a little flexibility.
Awesome.
So very cool. So let's kind of dive into the specific brands that I referenced when we started the conversation. So let's talk about each of these businesses, and let's kick it off with Allegra.
Sure. So the Allegra, or the marketing and print business model, this business started out as quick printers, and the quick printing industry really started back in the 60s. And as you noted in your opening, one of our brands, InstiPrints, which was a brand we had acquired after we invested in American Speedy, that brand started back in 1965. So it was one of the first franchises in this space.
Okay.
As the business has evolved over time, it went from being a quick printer to more of a small commercial printer. And we really evolved the business from a B2C, business to consumer, quick turn retail business, into more of a B2B, a business to business, account based, outside sales driven model. And then we also diversified, and a lot of this happened with my predecessors before I started. The business was diversified into mailing services, which was a great diversification, wide format printing or signage, as well as promotional products. And in the mid 90s, my predecessors, that's when they changed, or really they created the Allegra brand. And at the time it was called Allegra Print and Imaging. And the idea was to get that quick connotation out of the name and try to give our franchise members a brand that made it easier for them to sell higher value products and try to move up that value chain. So as you mentioned in the intro, Mike, Allegra Marketing Print Mail is the brand that we sell. I also wanted to say too that during my tenure, we've also added marketing services to the mix of the things that our franchise members can do. And that's when we changed it to Allegra Marketing Print Mail. But we still have some members that are operating under the other brands that you mentioned in your intro, American Speedy, InstaPrints, and KKP. And that's the marketing and print business model that we have.
All right, so let's talk about the next brand, which is Image 360. Tell us about that concept in the graphic and visual communications business.
Absolutely. So this is the visual and graphic communications business, or the signage business. And this business started out in the quick sign industry. So the quick sign business started about 20 years later than the quick print industry. And you correctly quoted that the franchises started around 1985-ish. Okay. But actually one of our brands, Signs Now, the founder of Signs Now, Mance Etheridge, is really credited for having the idea to start this business. He saw a piece of technology at a trade show and opened what he claimed to be the first 1-hour sign business in 1983, and he operated some of those ahead of starting the franchise in 1985, or maybe 1986. But and we've seen this business follow a similar trajectory. It went from the B2C quick turn retail model to the B2B account-based outside sales driven model. And we also have we launched the Image 360 name in 2013 for the same reasons, to create a name that didn't have the quick connotation, and to try to position our franchise members in the marketplace to go after more of the value added stuff that we see out there as well. And in addition to Image 360, as you mentioned, we have Signs Now and Signs by Tomorrow as our brands.
Great.
Well.
Thank you for that. And then next group is the RSVP brand in the direct mail space. Can you tell us a little bit about that
absolutely.
concept?
Yeah, this it's RSVP. Yeah, they're direct mail advertising. They are what they do is they produce and mail out a shared mail luxury card pack, they call it, because it's really aimed at the affluent, single family, owner occupied homeowners. And so our franchise members are out in the community talking to local businesses and finding the ones that really want to target that demographic. And then they work with those businesses to create an advertisement that's in the form of a postcard, and then that gets put into the deck that they send out. Much simpler business than our Allegra and Image 360. And when you said in the intro that True Install was our only business that wasn't brick and mortar, it's kind of true. RSVP can be a home-based business, and probably the majority of our owners are home-based, but as some of the owners get bigger, they do get some office space and hire employees. So that one could go both ways, but it also could be a home-based business.
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to mention the same thing. I thought about it, and I was like, once they get to scale, I'm sure they get space, but they can launch
absolutely
from home. So, and that leads us to True Install, which is a brand that we just learned about this year, and it's the newest brand in your portfolio. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. So this is a installation only business, and they install signs and graphics. And really, this business, we've been franchising it for less than a year at this point. And this business was created to really fill a need in the marketplace, whether it's our sign and graphics franchise members or the marketing and print franchise members that are also doing signage. Sometimes it's tough out there to find that trusted, reliable, professional source for installation. So the True Install model was really developed and created to fill that need in the marketplace.
Very cool. That's neat that you saw a void and you figured you have a lot of experience in that space, so let's create a concept to kind of
I could tell you another quick side story if you've got the time. So, I was at a breakfast for new Image 360s at convention, and I was listening to one of our new franchise members. He was so excited. He had just sold his first big job. And then he said the night before it was supposed to be installed, he called this installation company that was going to be doing the install for him. And the guy's like, sorry, I'm not going to be able to do that for you. He's like, what are you talking about? My client's expecting us to come out tomorrow and install it. He said, yeah, sorry, I'm going on vacation. He said, well, can you at least, give me the permits that you've pulled so I could find somebody else? He said, yeah, I never did any of that. And he just left our franchise member high and dry.
Oh,
this was so upsetting to me. I just started talking to everybody. I'm like, we got to solve this problem. What are we going to do? And it was actually one of our employees. He said, we should start a franchise. And man, the second he said that, I said, that is a great idea. And that is exactly what we did.
That's very cool. Thanks for sharing that story.
Sure.
So tell us, what's the approach that you guys take at Alliance Franchise Brands that's unique and different from other franchises in the space? I know you're not the only ones in these categories. So
sure.
The approach that makes you guys a little bit different and unique.
Well, I think something that helps differentiate us is that our executive team is experienced and invested. And I did some calculations, Mike, and I found that, in our franchise operations group, we have 10 people on our executive team, and collectively we have 145 years with Alliance Franchise Brands. So that's an average of 14 and a half years per executive team member. But what's really neat about it is we have a handful of our executive team members who were former franchise members in our network and operated the businesses we support. And among that group, we have 68 years of experience of working in our centers on our executive team. Then
what better experience is that than they have the experience in the field as owners with skin in the game.
Yeah.
And now they're sitting on the other side helping to support the owners.
It is so critical, Mike. And if you take the two guys that are running our corporate owned centers, our Allegra and Image 360, between the two of them, they have 49 years. So as when you look at the entire executive team, both franchise operations and corporate owned operations, we have 117 years of experience.
Yeah, that's really impressive. And I think that is the headline, is the experience that you bring to the table is what makes you different and better.
And it's important to me that, our top executives also have ownership. I'm the majority owner of the business, but a lot of the folks that sit on the executive team are also owners, So, we are all invested and really focused on the long-term success of the business because of our ownership.
That's really great. I wanted to touch on another thing. I know that you like to read, and you've already mentioned a few books that have kind of helped you kind of move your business forward. One book that you talked to us about when we were kind of touring the facilities was The Blue Ocean Strategy, which I found to be really interesting. Can you touch on that and how it impacted you and kind of what the Blue Ocean Strategy is all about?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I love that book, Mike. And we launched our Blue Ocean Strategy back in 2012 at convention. So it's really been in play for the past 12 years. And I'll share with you what my takeaways were from the book. So what I learned is that when you operate in a mature industry, which we do, all the competitors have entered the field and know the rules of the game, which they have and do. Then the thing that you're making, your product, becomes a commodity. And when you're selling a commodity, you can only compete on price, quality, and service. And our franchise members get really high ratings on quality and service. And that's a great thing that helps them to retain a lot of their business. But when you're out there trying to get new work and you're bidding on new work, sometimes it gets hard to differentiate yourself based upon quality and service, because the other people who are bidding on it say that they have great quality and service too. And you know what? A lot of them do,
Yeah.
So in that situation, it really comes down to pricing. And when you get that kind of price competition going, that's what creates this bloody red ocean of competition, right? So the question is how do you swim out of this bloody red ocean of competition and into the blue ocean of opportunity? And the book tells us that we have to be able to create a leap in value for our clients. So we thought lots about this, and we decided that our blue ocean strategy is to help our franchise members to be sales-driven solutions providers, right? They need to be sales-driven because business doesn't just walk in the front door like it used to. I mean, the guys that have been around for a while, business used to walk in the front door, like a lot of it. These were great businesses way back when. But no, they need to get out. They need to get out. They need to meet with their clients. They need to meet with prospects. They need to get to know them, to understand their businesses, understand what they're trying to accomplish. And when they understand this, then they look at their capabilities. They look at all the things that they're able to do, and then they go back to them with solutions that help them to achieve a goal or solve a problem, And when they're doing this, sometimes you're suggesting things to them that they haven't even thought of themselves. And this puts you in a much different position than when you're just one of three bidders on something that they already know that they want to get done. And this is how we can add real value.
You portray yourself as part of their team. You're providing solutions. You're actually caring about their business and thinking of ways to improve their business that they might not even have on their radar. So
Mike, that's a very astute observation. And I was in one of our centers and I was talking to this woman who was an account manager, and she had incredible results on this client of theirs, and she'd grown it like crazy. And I don't think she'd ever heard the blue ocean strategy, yet she embodied it, because when I listened to her talk about what she did, I mean, she was part of a weekly meeting that they had out there, and she sat there, and whenever it was a big restaurant chain, and whenever they would talk about a problem they had, she'd say, I can take care of that for you. They were having trouble getting the coloring books and the crayons out there. And that wasn't anything that we were doing at the time. She just figured out how to do it, how to source them, how to get them, and how to get them there. And so she's solving problems for them, and they loved her. And she was always just there living the blue ocean strategy,
Yeah, that reminds me of, before I became a full-time consultant, I worked for a chain called Glory Days Grill, a full-service sports bar concept. And I used to go to their monthly general manager meetings and just sit in, even though I'm more of the franchise development guy. And this was all about operations. I learned so much about the business and how to help where I could just by learning about the struggles and challenges that they had. And it was like taking me outside of my day-to-day and putting me in a little different environment. But it was a great learning experience for me, and I got better at my job.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, that's great.
So let's talk a little bit. Let's shift gears and talk about technology, because you've mentioned over the years how the printing business and the sign business has changed.
Yeah.
How does technology impact your business?
Oh, Mike, it's huge. It's having a huge impact on our business right now. And, we're really lucky because our chief technology officer, Joe DeGuano, he's a guy that had a technology background that ended up doing some work with one of our centers. They ended up hiring him. They ended up making him an owner of that center, and they grew, and they eventually had 3 centers, and Joe and these 2 other guys own these 3 centers. So Joe had 19 years working in a center. He's a technology guy that worked in our centers for 19 years. He's now been on the home office team for 11 years. So we've got this incredible resource in this guy that has the technology background, but understands our businesses and the operations really well. And it's really been his vision and leadership that we've followed over these last 11 years since he's been here. And, we've been able to do great things. We've put together technology packages. We have a package, we vetted a bunch of different softwares that our franchise members could use. And we've integrated them together so they work together as more of a system. And we call that work stream. And we've developed that for our owners as I said, under Joe's leadership. And, the franchise members that are adopting these technologies in their business, the results they're getting are incredible, not just in terms of efficiency and increasing their profitability, but also in the way of reducing errors, which also helps with their profitability.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk specifically about some of the advancements in technology that gets you excited. What are you most excited about in terms of current technology or what you see?
I think the thing I'm most excited about right now, because it's still relatively new and it's a different kind of technology, it's Inkjet Technology. And Mike, you got to see it in action still when it was still relatively brand new. We just got it going. But in our corporate-owned Allegra, we've bought a new roll-fed digital inkjet press. And the inkjet technology has been out there for a while, but it's come down in price and the quality's gone up. So we decided to make that move. And I'll just give you a quick example to highlight the impact that it's having on our business. The very first job that we ran on it would have taken 8 hours or a full shift to run on one of our old toner devices. And it ran on this new device in 15 minutes.
8 hours to 15 minutes.
Yeah. This thing runs.
Absolutely
this
incredible.
Thing can run, and it's on a roll as opposed to a cut sheet, but it can run up to 150 meters a minute. And we bought the finishing equipment that goes with it too. So we've already seen it's just really opening up opportunities to us that we just wouldn't have been able to be competitive on in the past without that equipment.
Yeah, like you said, I saw that firsthand, and that was kind of the big aha moment, and it was really exciting to kind of see it in action. And I told you I took a quick video of it, and I sent it to my 2 teenage sons, and immediately I got a reply back that, am I at the Dunder Mifflin factory in Scranton?
That's
which I thought was hysterical. But I mean, it is really a piece of machinery that makes you, it's just impressive.
Yeah,
so
that's
totally. I get how that technology is a game changer for your corporate location.
That's awesome, Mike.
Yeah, well, Mike, you've shared so much with us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of walk through these brands and your culture and your core values, etc. Anything else you want to add to the mix before we wrap up today?
Quickly, if I could slide one more thing in, I'd just like to talk about our Matchmaker program. This is something that, I believe that we are the first ones doing this. We've been doing it for over 20 years. I know that there's some other people that are out there doing it too, but I think it's something that's relatively unique about us. And what the Matchmaker program is if we have somebody who's interested in joining our network, and it's really only for our marketing and print brands and sign and graphics brands for an Allegra or an Image 360. If somebody wants to join, become an Allegra or an Image 360, once they become a franchise member, we will find them an independent print or sign business to buy. And that's really an incredible thing. We play Matchmaker. That's why it's called that. We bring them together. And Mike, I know that you and other franchise consultants that I've talked about really love doing resales. And the reason is when you look at your candidates getting in and being able to buy a going concern, a business that has revenue, has equipment in place, has a team in place, and you compare that to the investment that you make to start something up. I mean, I've done the internal rate of return calculations on it. Getting the going concern just really blows it away. And that's what we love about the Matchmaker. It's actually, we have a new person on our development team, And they made an observation that I thought was really cool. When we told them about the Matchmaker program, they said, oh, I see. It's like we have the ability to do a resale in any market or any territory, whether we have one of ours for sale or not, right? So that's actually a pretty cool thing. And, we just had a really good candidate come in a couple weeks ago for a discovery day, and pretty quickly she told us that she wants to move forward. So we're trying to get her franchise agreement done, but we've already got our mergers and acquisitions team out there in the field talking to independents, and we're going to try to find her a business.
Yeah, congrats on that. Sounds like, she's really bought
Mike.
into the matchmaking concept. And I like the fact that, you mentioned revenue and cash flow from day one. It is a really nice advantage. And, the fact that you guys have a kind of an inventory of independence that you can, and think about how difficult it is for someone that may not be in the business and they may not understand how to value the business or see the holes. And you guys are their partners in negotiating the deal and just participating in the, selection, evaluation of acquiring that independent business and then converting it into one of your either Allegra Image 360 that has all these systems and support. It's a really interesting program. So I'm excited to, participate and help you bring some candidates.
Awesome. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. This is great. So thanks for sharing that. So, well, Mike, this has been really great. Again, thank you so much for your time. If anyone listening would like to connect with Mike and his team to discuss franchises in the Alliance Franchise Brands portfolio, contact me at franchiseqb.com or on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB. I'll get you connected with Mike and his team. Mike, thanks so much for taking the time to get in the huddle and speak with us about Alliance Franchise Brands.
Oh, no. Well, thank you, Mike. I appreciate you having me on the podcast, and I hope I've provided some useful information to you and your listeners.
You certainly have. It's been great. Thanks so much, Mike.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Take it easy.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Franchise QB podcast, where you're at the helm of your future as a franchise owner. If you enjoyed the content, please rate the show and recommend it to anyone that might be interested in franchising. Make sure to visit franchiseqb.com to subscribe to my newsletter and for an actionable playbook to go from walk-on to legend in your new business. Follow us on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB and join us every week for a new episode. See you next time.
Visit franchiseqb.com to take the next step of your journey towards wealth, independence, and franchise ownership. And remember, when working for the man gets old, you must do something bold. Thank you for listening.